The way they talked about their wives, like if you're I don't know how women watch this stuff and not find it all so grotesque, because they were just like, I'd be in jail without my wife. And they did this like back and forth about how the wives saved their lives.
Jennifer, thank you for loving him through that mistake. Because the only reason why I'm here and not in prison is because my wife loved me too.
I was watching Egger on the thing, and Egger's like, as a Christian, I find this deeply gross because it's gross to watch him sort of hide behind this Jesus redemption story when he's obviously a despicable person, when he obviously has no real remorse about any of these things. Everything about it is an insult to women. And for Jodi Ernst, I think it would end up feeling like a very personal insult to her, but she has to swallow it. She doesn't have to. She's decided to swallow it. It's painful to watch.
Yeah, Mark Kelly got at this like in his questioning, but there was no, he didn't get a chunk of flesh. But when he was like, you saying that you're not a perfect person and that you've been redeemed, and you saying that all of the accusations against you are anonymous smears that aren't true, like those two things don't match. Like, what were you redeemed from?
You say you've had personal issues in your past. Yet when asked about those very issues, you blame an anonymous smear campaign, even when many of these claims are not anonymous. Which is it? Have you overcome personal issues, or are you the target of a smear campaign? It can't be both.
Like, admit what you did and how you are redeemed from it. And he just kind of smirked, like he ran the clock and then sort of smirked at Mark Kelly at the end of his speech and was like, all right, buddy, 7 minutes are up. Okay, let's move on over to Jim Banks, where he can ask me about, what kind of bullets going, what kind of guns. Anyway, Sam, you suffered through the longest of this today. What anything else jump out at you?
On the personal stuff, I kind of came into today thinking that none of that would matter. And we've lived through this a couple times now. I mean, Trump, it didn't matter. Kavanaugh, it didn't really matter. You can say whatever you want about the merits of the accusations, but it's very evident at this point that if you are accused of these types of things that Pete Hegseth was accused of, your side's going to rally behind you. You're going to denounce it as anonymous smears, and they're going to chalk it up to some sort of either deep state or, unscrupulous media report or whatever. So I didn't think that would really move the needle. Where I was kind of most interested in seeing what happened was on some of the more substantive things. And they get there. Like, I really was curious if someone would ask him, would you do what Mark Esper did and like refuse to allow the military to sign off on the military shooting at fellow Americans, right?
In June of 2020, then President Trump directed former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper to shoot protesters in the legs in downtown D.C., an order Secretary Esper refused to comply with. Would you carry out such an order from President Trump?
Senator, I was in the Washington, D.C. National Guard unit that was in Lafayette Square during those events.
Would you carry out an order to shoot protesters in the legs?
I saw 50 Secret Service agents get injured by rioters trying to jump over the fence, set the church on fire, and destroy a statue.
That sounds to me that you will comply with such an order. You will shoot protesters in the leg. Moving on.
In his own crafty way, he weaseled out of answering those questions. But the fact that he did that, I felt was kind of ominous. Like those are standard questions that any prior defense secretary nominee would have been like, of course I'm not going to sick the military on U.S. citizens. That's crazy. Like,
in a normal country where this is not just, whatever, Redskins against Buccaneers, like after the Lissa Slotkin question, it goes to the Republican who's like, so could you just clarify, are you going to send the troops after American citizens or not? Like, I don't know.
And they did. They said no. They were like, we just want a yes or no. Would you do that? And he wouldn't give it.
Right, but the Republicans didn't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. If you're a Republican out there, you'd be like, look, I support you, but like, I just want to be sure. Like, you're not gonna like sign off on shooting fellow Americans, right? Like that's crazy. But of course, that's not. They can't even ask that. So.
What did we think about Tim Kaine then? Tim Kaine's hair. I started with Tim Kaine's hair, and then just kind of going all in on. I mean, his point. Look, the point Tim Kaine was making from the dais is a point that I've made on Nicole Wallace's show several times. I do kind of wonder if it's a better point for Nicole Wallace's show than it is for the confirmation hearing.
And you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
It was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so grateful for the marriage I have to this amazing woman behind me.
You've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything,
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
I spoke to Kane right after the hearing about this, and he said, I believe that character matters for a defense secretary, and honesty and oaths and things like that matter. That's true, but they don't matter to the relevant people on the committee. And so him going in on it matters and is good, but it's not something that anyone on that committee, or really all but a couple people in this Republican Senate, will respond to.
Yeah, and his angle was that you made this oath to your wives.
Yeah.
If you broke that, how can we trust that you would break your oath to us? That's how he was trying to make it serious.
I gotta admit, I thought it was like fine, but I actually thought it was kind of, I didn't think it moved the needle. And honestly, and I'm not trying to be Mark Wynne-Mullen here, but like there are degrees of, fuck ups, ethical and moral transgressions. And like, I'm not sure that Tim Kaine or anyone else should be like, this is the line at which point you can no longer be defense secretary.
Yeah. I mean, and this goes back to Joe's point about who's your audience. Because if you want to convince a bunch of senators that somebody's unfit and you're kind of going to go after, like, it did look a little bit like a humiliation play as opposed to a substantive critique of the things that would keep him from adequately fulfilling the job, which I think sexual assault is fair game on that. Yeah. But I thought that Alyssa Slotkin was much more effective with where she was going. Right. And like the other thing is like Trump, again, I'm going to end where I started, which is the way that Trump looms over everything. People feel like the American people have rendered a judgment on sort of the traditional view of character. Now, does it make Republicans hypocrites of the century because of the way that we grew up listening to them talk about character counting when character was king, every book they wrote, everything they said during the Clinton administration? Sure, they're all hypocrites. But it does feel like from even a democracy standpoint, like the American people have sort of spoken on whether or not they care about that. And I just think he should have gone hard at the things that really disqualify him. Even if it's like kind of a fair point, it's like, yeah, it's definitely not going to move the needle. Not where we are now.
Yeah, Mitt Romney doesn't work in the building anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't think Tim Kaine got that memo.
Dude, Donald Trump is fucking president. Like I think the verdict.
Not yet, Sam. I've got 5 more days. All right, let me live in it.